Obviously, we're going to have a lot more people come in during this one, so be prepared for the constant slamming door. I hope. Oh, man, maybe being too egotistical there. Anyway, my name's Kevin Williams. Thank you again for coming to this session. This is the second of the two sessions that we've dedicated to out-of-home entertainment. I'd like to thank Victor and the organisers of Digital Hollywood Fall. It's a great event and a lot of things to talk about, and I'm really happy that I could get this panel together. Thank you to Michael Marciani for filling in on that one for us. The key aspects that we were dealing with yesterday were on the location-based entertainment side, and this particular part of the session is going to focus a little bit more on the bigger picture, on the theme park, on the cinema side, both the immersion application as well as some of the new technologies that are being applied to it. I'm going to ask each one of the speakers to give us a slight rundown of what they're doing, encapsulated. I'm going to throw a couple of painful questions at them, and then I'm going to take some questions from the glorious audience in front of us. The core issue you need to know is who the hell I am. I'm Kevin Williams. I run the DNA Association, co-founder, but I also run a consultancy. Now, we focus on the out-of-home digital entertainment sector. Just for those that weren't at the previous presentation, we have this fantastic Venn diagram that gives us a rundown of exactly what that sector represents. Fundamentally, we've split it into the core units. The green amorphous blob is the amusement, pay-for-play sector. The purple amorphous blob is the theme park, visitor attraction sector. Then the orange, for all you colorblind individuals out there, are the retail and hospitality, food, beverage. Retail attainment is the buzzword that they like using. And then, of course, we've got the fantastic squidge in the middle, which is the education museums, as well as the leisure and fitness sectors. The reason why we have to define these blobs is because, as you can see, they all intersect, they all influence each other, and those intersections becoming more and more relevant over the last couple of years, especially with new technology. There are two blobs that I've missed out. The top grey one is the consumer entertainment sector, though it does have an influence on our market. It is an industry that can fend for itself, a multi-billion-dollar industry. But the blob below that is the digital gaming, the casino, the gambling sectors. Now, if you'd come to one of my presentations and stayed awake last year, you would have seen that slide and you would have seen no change. Well, 2015 has brought some major changes, and now we have to include the casino and gaming sector as a fully fledged member of the digital out-of-home entertainment. E-sport, one aspect, but also we're seeing the inclusion of e-payments or prize payments, skill payments into our sector. So that's going to be another string to our bow. Just a little bit of rundown of the kind of applications we're seeing with augmented reality and virtual reality. The marketing industry and the promotional industry has taken to the technology right from the get-go. One of the first virtual reality experiences was actually deployed before Oculus was actually founded or launched. But we've seen companies like Red Bull and Nissan and others investing heavily into this sector, pop-up promotional approaches. We're now seeing the theme park sector and family entertainment sector coming up with socially interactive virtual reality approaches. And of course, augmented reality has been deployed on and off for the last couple of years. Not getting the same plaudits or shouting as other sectors, but it is going to be a major component of our future investment. And then from the mounted or encumbered technologies, we've also got the non-encumbered. So we're seeing projection mapping, 3D projection mapping being deployed into facilities, interactive game experiences. We're seeing full projection experiences where you walk in and everything within the facility is projected. And we're now seeing the deployment of caves, computer automated virtual environments that have been used in the military sector as well as in law enforcement. Those training systems are now being repositioned, swords into plowshares, and being developed as entertainment machines. Of course, the benefits for those kinds of approaches is that you don't need to wear a head mount, but you still get immersed. Anyway, that's enough from me, other than the big plug. If you need to know more about this sector, please go for the book, available at eBay. So I'd like to start first. Dan, could you jump in?
Hi. I'll try. Hello. No? Maybe not. Maybe now. Am I on now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Hi, thanks. I'm Dan Gemelli, VP and CTO of Mediamation. You can read all about it up there. Very interesting writing. Mediamation's been around for about 24 years now, a little over 24 years. We started in the theme park industry. That was our main thing. We went right into computer-controlled show control systems, audio, video. We moved quickly into simulators. That was one of our very first projects from our very first customers. We were the first to put in a actual digital high-def 3D simulator system outside of Las Vegas when we had to take 70 millimeter film and convert it to high def, and everybody said, what is high def? So we've been around for quite a while, and we've been trying to push the envelopes. We're a small company. We've got about 50 people over at our shop now, and we've just opened up another shop in China for the China market because it's exploding. So our whole world as far as out of home is we've always been out of home. What we've been really pushing on in the last 8 years or so is we started manufacturing our own simulators, our own 4D motion seats as we call them. And the 4D motion seats have kind of taken over the simulators of the past from the theme park market in that it's basically got lower cost and a lot higher throughput. And that's kind of the thing we keep going at as we go through everything, is trying to make sure that as we develop new products, new technologies, as we adapt to a lot of the technologies that are out there, that we take it in a way that allows us to make something that's commercially viable. We all have to stay in business. We all have to eat. So it's a really nice combination to be able to take the hardware and the software and mix them together. You can see a couple of pictures up there. You can see my son. He's in the middle there, the good-looking kid. Yeah.
Cheap.
Yeah, he worked very cheap. Gave him some popcorn. One of the things that we've done recently that's been moving for both me and for others on the panel here as well is not only we've taken this from theme parks, but we've moved this into the cinema market, into the mainstream movie theater cinema market. And that's a challenging market, to say the least. We have to deal a lot more with the producers, the directors, and the studios as well. There's a lot of worry about preserving the content, while in a theme park they design the content specifically for a particular attraction. But the cinemas, on the other hand, are really looking for how do we get people out of the home? How do we get people from sitting there and watching movies on their iPhones and iPads, which, you know, when we were kids, we were like, constantly, I need bigger, I need bigger, I need bigger, I need better sound. And now they're like, I need smaller, smaller, and smaller, and little headphones. And so it's a challenge to say, what do we need to do to bring these people from the home and bring them out to the cinemas, bring them out to the theme parks, bring them out to the family entertainment centers, where we can actually have a lot more flexibility with what we're doing as far as working with the different media, working different technologies, introducing stuff, and getting people to go to a destination where they can actually experience something that they're not going to experience at home. So that's kind of the focus of what Mediamation's doing. We've been moving into, for the last 2 years now, VR. We can go to the next one. There we are. So at the last IAPA show, which is the big amusement park show for us, we introduced our VR 4D, which we've now called Reactive VR. Reactive VR. Reactiver. So it was our first foray to actually have a working model at the show, and it went over very well. As with all the VR that's out there now, the big problem with the VR at the moment is the commercialization of an actual headset that you can actually take in and say, here's 200 of these things, and then there's 200 sitting in the corner for the next group of people that are going to flow into the experience, into the theater, walk through, or whatever it might be. So we're kind of encouraged this year that they've actually, using the Samsung Gear, have got a VR roller coaster. I believe they're putting one in Canada. They have one in Germany, which is an actual physical roller coaster with all the timing, but you get to pick what roller coaster you think you're on, and you get to virtually experience the actual roller coaster with the visuals coming through your Samsung Gear. And there's a lot of technology involved with that, timing it so the guy at the back has proper experience than the guy at the front of the roller coaster. They actually shoot you around the same track several times, but it seems like you're going like miles and miles. So that was very encouraging to everybody. They actually have a commercial application in the out-of-home market where they're actually looking to get consumers, customers, paying customers to come out and experience something. So we think that as things improve, that very soon, based on what Oculus and Facebook decide they're going to do, we'll have a consumer version that'll allow us to really exploit this technology in ways that involve, in our case, synchronizing our motion seats and the special effects and everything else up with an actual interactive attraction. So anybody that's coming to IAPA this year, we'll have some really fun surprises for you. So we're doing several things with VR in our booth this year as well. So we invite you all to come. And that's pretty much that's what Mediamation does. We're a bunch of tech geeks and manufacturing people over there that put stuff together and make it happen.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Very good, Dan.
Matthew?
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks to Digital Hollywood for inviting me. I'm Matthew Gratz, co-founder and creative supervisor for New Deal Studios. I have a kind of a unique company that I started with two partners, Ian Hunter and Shannon Gans, about going on 20 years ago. And we've always pivoted and tried to do something different in entertainment. We started as a miniature effects and art direction company, and then we went into full production as well as photographic services. Then we did digital effects, and now we're creating content involved pretty heavily in virtual reality. The challenges that we've seen in the business, and it's interesting to be working in, and primarily we work in feature film, although we do some theme park work. In fact, one of our very, very first jobs originally it was called Hunter Gratzner Industries. Myself, Ian, Shannon, and I were the principals at that time, same as New Deal. We just changed the name because we became more of a production company. And we didn't want our names on a company that had a stage, and if somebody slipped and fell and cracked their skull, we were like, oh yeah, our names are, that guy got killed on Hunter Gratzner's stage. So we decided probably changing the name would be a good idea. But our first project was, very appropriate for this panel, was for Epcot Center called Immersive Energy, which was still playing, I think. And it's a big motion ride where they have the seats like a 270 degree or maybe it's 200 degree field of view ride with 3 IMAX cameras. And we photographed an oil field because they couldn't shoot a real oil field in Texas because at this time, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it's a funny story. At this time, Exxon had just had the Valdez disaster and they had to like clean up their act. So they're like, oh, we'll put a bunch of money into this pavilion called the Exxon Presents Immersive Energy and show other ways of promoting energy other than petroleum because we just destroyed half of Alaska's coastline. So what they did was they put this thing together and it had like wind turbines. It was narrated by Ellen DeGeneres. It was very cool. Wind turbines, like solar, and they shot all these things for real, but when they went to go shoot a real Texas oil field, to show a Texas oil field, it actually looked like really horrible because it was, like old cars and it was rusted out. And it's like, well, this isn't really tourist friendly for an Epcot Center ride. So we built it as a miniature in forced perspective and shot it at Vasquez Rocks, very well famous from the original Star Trek TV show. But at any rate, we shot this thing and it was really neat. It was 3 IMAX cameras that were gen locked and on a big crane, and we puppeteered it through on a big dolly arm and such. And it was forced perspective with the national park in the background. It was awesome. And we had some kind of rusted out things. And what ended up happening is when we saw the playback and everybody was really, really happy, all it looked like was Exxon was drilling in a national park. So I don't know if it really worked well, but it's still playing in Epcot Center. So anyway, we've done a lot of stuff over the years. I think you still see it. We've been very fortunate to work with some terrific directors. We work a lot with Martin Scorsese. We work a lot with Christopher Nolan. My partner Ian works a lot with Chris, and I work a lot with Marty. And last year, or I should think it was this year, we won the Oscar for Interstellar, so that was exciting. So we do a lot of different mixed media. So we shoot a lot of principal action as well, and we develop our own content. So in the process of all of the things we do, from the digital effects side to practical to working with actors, VR seemed like a really interesting opportunity. And we knew some people who knew Jaunt, familiar with Jaunt VR, I guess it's now just called Jaunt. And we did a test with their camera. I saw their camera being tested briefly, and then we had an opportunity to make a short film called The Mission. And it was something that I directed, that I brought 2 guys in to write, Joe Kanarick and Ryan Godet, who I've worked with on a couple other feature film projects. And I never shot with a VR camera. And the whole idea with what we were doing was I wanted to give, and let me just briefly, my take on virtual reality is true virtual reality is where you have a real-time render engine, whether you've done light field capture of a live action scene or it's completely computer generated from scratch. But real VR, and when I say real, meaning that you have the ability to walk around a space. And a lot of people are talking about VR and it's photographic, and currently really, even though we're calling it VR, it's really more like immersive reality, not so much virtual reality, because what's happening is you're not, in photographic VR, like what we did with The Mission, and a couple other projects I've done, a music video, and I just shot something with Nokia. We're photographing a space that, while you do have the ability to look around and some of the experiences are 3D, what you don't have the ability to do is walk around the space and peer around objects in dimension, because it's a photographed flat image, or even if it's a stereography process, you're still dealing with a kind of a flat thing that you can't change because it's not a real-time render. However, because I want to give people an experience where they are transported and have a sense of presence, as everybody talks about in VR, I'm trying to do stuff that's a little bit more cinematic, in the sense that even though there's some remarkably terrific documentaries in VR and some really great sports events, things, and we've been involved with both, I wanted something where to put somebody in a Hollywood movie, so that they are actually in this experience. And our experiences are available on Google Cardboard, you can watch it on Milk VR with the Samsung Gear VR, as well as the Oculus. But the idea was to give someone an experience that it's an impossible way to watch a movie. Or I should say it's impossible to watch it any other way. Because my take on VR, truthfully, is it's going to be content driven. Because if the content isn't there, all the really cool headsets, all the really great players, and all the really great stitching software and cameras are going to go to the side. It's going to become, not to shoot myself in the foot, it's going to be kind of like a 3D television, where it's like we got this great equipment, but there's nothing to watch. And for the general public to adopt this, there's got to be content. And there's got to be content that's compelling enough to put something on your face. Now, when you go to a theme park, different story. Theme park is an experience where you want to have something that's larger than life and bigger, and it's very transportive. But for some of the VR we're working with, which is in the home, or in the case of like a Google Cardboard, sitting in a Starbucks looking at it, or on an airplane doing a cross-country trip, to put something on your head and look through some device, you really have to make the content compelling enough, and something that's more than just a film. So the projects we're involved in, like the mission, was a really great experience, and that hopefully will get wrapped up. It's done. Jaunt is reworking some of their stitching, so we're trying to get the best 3D experience possible. There's a music video I did called for a band called Galvanized Souls, called New Generation. That was a heck of a lot of fun. We did with Immersive 360 and Springbok Entertainment. And the big push, I think, with VR, because it's now the catchphrase, is, as I said, it's got to get to people, in a conference like this, or at Sundance, or in New York, or in these really film and tech scenarios everybody's talking about. I mean, I'm very familiar with Digital Hollywood. I've seen this for years and years and years. And this year, it's like everything's VR AR, which is great. But the thing is, people in Oklahoma or southeast of the United States who have no idea what tech is, who are not subscribed to Wired magazine or don't care about a film festival, have got to understand and embrace it, because that's the only thing that's going to push it forward in the marketplace. I think the advantages of VR in a theme park situation are colossal, and I think that's where you have more of a captive audience, where people are going to go to pay to have an experience which is different, and then they'll say, oh, I want to go ride the roller coaster, which, by the way, sounds really terrific and terrifying all at the same time. But I want to do that, and they're there to experience that. But to get VR to really get a foothold in the home marketplace, it's going to have content that's compelling.
Thank you very much. Sang?
Hello, my name is Sancho. I am with CJ 4D Plex. Just a little bit of background about the company. CJ is one of the largest and oldest company based in Korea. We are one of the largest and oldest entertainment and media company in Asia. We've been in this business for 20 years, actually. We'll be celebrating the founding of our movie studio business at AFM this November, the 20th year anniversary. So we're one of the largest content makers, as well as one of the largest exhibitors around the world. CJCGV, which is the brand under which we operate our exhibition arm, is now 5th largest in terms of number of tickets sold around the world, with about 2,000 screens based in Korea, China, various parts of Asia, and in the United States. And as an extension of our content and exhibition business, our mantra is both as a going concern, but also as fans of the movie business, is to get butts in seats. And increasingly with the younger generation and choice and options of in-home entertainment, you're going to see decrease in people coming to the movie theaters, and that's what we're trying to combat. And to do that, much like Mediamation and their technology, we have 2 immersive cinema products. First, the more mature product is 4DX. That's the motion seating environmental effects. We have about 200 of these things will be installed by end of this year around the world. Our biggest markets are China, Mexico, Korea, and now Japan. And the more newer technologies is ScreenX, which isn't shown here, but it's the 270-degree projection. And with that, what we do is we take an existing auditorium. You have a regular motion picture, but we have side projection and stitching technology that projects onto a regular movie theater wall. So when you walk in, it looks like a normal auditorium, but you get immersed into a 270-degree surround picture experience. We haven't had a commercial film open in this format yet, but we'll be releasing 2 major Korean feature films in this format in November and December in Korea, and hopefully in January around the world. And we're looking to have at least 6 to 8 commercial films of both Asian or Hollywood studio products by end of 2016. Going back to 4DX, we've been in this business for about 5 years, again, 200 installations, hopefully by end of this year. And this year, with the movie business doing such a big explosion compared to last year, we've had our first 3 films in the history of 4DX that did 1 million admissions around the world. That's Furious 7, Jurassic World, and the Avengers films. So I think, with Mediamation, I think we've sort of seen and proven that these are not gimmicks. This is beyond proof of concept. People have accepted motion seating and immersive cinema as a legitimate format at your neighborhood multiplex, and we hope to grow this business more, again, to get people to come to the movie theaters and really enjoy the magic of movies as they're supposed to be.
Thank you very much. Chris, you're up.
Thanks. My name is Chris Ratner. I'm the founder and CEO of Real Experience Entertainment, and thanks Digital Hollywood for having me come out here and talk about what I've been dreaming about and what I think is going to be innovative in its own right. Just to kind of bring us into kind of where my head is at, I want to share something with you that my daughter shared with me a few weeks ago, and it was a quote from Steven Spielberg. I feel there's no substitute for going out to the movies. There's nothing like it. And that's something I believe in my heart and also my business sense. I think there is nothing out there quite like the movie-going experience, and it has allowed me to take a look very deeply at what's happening in the movie theater environment and the exhibition environment, which we've seen a downturn in attendance over the last several years, and it continues to happen. Yes, there are those golden tent poles that seem to bring in the audience, but overall we're seeing attendance continue to decline, and I think that's going to continue to happen into the future. So as what's been said here is that we've got to find new ways to get butts in the seats, if you will. My background is kind of unique in that I've worked at studios. I worked at DreamWorks for a period of time, as well as I worked in the software space, and most recently in the IT space. So I'm kind of a tech head, and that's given me a unique opportunity to keep abreast of technologies that are out there and seeing all these new wonderful things that are coming to life right before our eyes. And there's a lot of great technology out there, and I think all this technology has a place. And that place is where I think all that technology needs to go. So at Real Experience, we've kind of taken a look at, what does it mean to create an environment for guests to come and have an event and to have an experience like no other. And it's something that gets them involved in what the concept is of moviegoing. I can remember as being a child going to the movies and it being a special experience. Going to the movies today is not a special experience. Sure, Star Wars is coming out later this year, and we've got those tickets, but the reality is that it's very few that those movies exist today, and the youth of today just don't understand that concept of being amped up and excited to go out to the movies. So the way in which we've kind of looked at this is what we really want to do is we want to be able to create a space, a social context or construct that allows people to come in and be social and be active, be present, and have wonderful movie or I'm going to actually switch that on you and say content experiences. I don't think that movies are the only things that should be put on the big screen. I think there's plenty of other content that's available and that's being distributed today that can be on the big screen. Sporting events, some major television programs, all deserve their own right on the big screen because of the way that they're produced. And so in this context, in this space, what we want to do is we want to immerse our guests and have them have an experiential activity based on and in the worlds of those movies. So, we've tested this with user groups, and we've asked people about this type of concept. We've gotten some extremely positive results, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I'm here today talking about this and really starting the conversation on it. Our company is a startup. We are in the process of looking at all of our IP, getting our sponsors lined up, investors lined up as well in order to take this to the next level. And so I don't have many years of experience like everybody here on the panel does, but at the end of the day, what we want to create is really the new playground for seeing content, and that's seeing contents of all type. But one of the places that we think that we as a company feel is a good place to start is looking at content that's already been put on the big screen. And having those magical experiences that the youth of today don't really get a sense of and understand put on the big screen, and so that they can get an understanding of where the stories that they're seeing regurgitated today originally came from and actually are better. So, I love Jurassic Park. It's a wonderful movie. My kids didn't want to go to the movies and see it. And I'm thinking, why don't you want to see it? Because they saw it 25 times on their iPad and their iPhone. And I was thunderstruck. I sat there and I said, how come you can't understand that you have to see this on the big screen? So I dragged them. I took them down to the IMAX. We saw it when it came out last year. And they thought that was the most incredible experience that they had ever seen on the big screen. And I take my kids to the movies a lot, but they had never seen anything quite like that. And they saw a movie that was very different. And I believe fundamentally that as human beings, we want to see these spectacles bigger than life, and you can't see them on the small screen. So Real Experience is about creating that larger than life venue that really merges many of the technologies and processes that these gentlemen have spoken about today, and really scripts out an environment that creates those unique experiences. And we've worked out our methodology, we've worked out how we wanted to do these productions and how we're going to build them and make them immersive and really excite the senses. And it's about really taking an individual and not necessarily slapping on goggles when they walk in the door. It's really about giving them the stage and the setup of exactly what's happening in that space and then letting them freely move within it. And that's everything from seeing the movie in its original glory all the way to then stepping directly into the movie and interacting with actors and real life sets and seeing the actual events play out that might be slightly changed from what they saw, but immerses them nonetheless in the environment and creates a wholly unique experience which should elevate and which will elevate the experience that they have with these movies. We're excited about it. The people that we've spoken to are really excited about this concept as well, and we're looking to continue to move it forward. I think I'll leave it with that. And again, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions here, and then I'm going to throw it to the audience to throw in their components. But fundamentally, you get the big picture, pardon the pun, regarding what we've brought here to this part of the Digital Hollywood event. We've shown that the traditional approach to the cinema theme park experience is now being upgraded, rebooted, the inclusion of immersion, the utilization of new film approaches and immersive film approaches, and also taking the unachievable at home technologies, the physicality, better screens, motion seats, and now looking at virtual reality as a component. And so that leads me to the first question, really. What is the benefit, gentlemen, from the physical transference of the digital experience to using virtual reality or using new kinds of presenting the screen? And if I could start with you, San, especially now with what is it that drove you towards Super X?
I think, as we talked about, it's from the business perspective. Our company has a vested interest in having people come to see movies at the movie theater, both from the fact that we're, again, produce 15 to 20 commercial films. Some of them have to gross more than $100 million just in our home market, which is Korea, to operating 900 screens across just the Korean market in terms of movie theaters. So we need to continue to bring people into the movie theaters for our business to sustain going forward. And secondly, we also do want to emphasize the fact that CJ got into this business because we are a fan of movies, fan of television, fan of going to the movies. All of us, from our founders and owners down to the people that work in these companies. So we are passionate about the movie-going experience, and as such, even before getting into the immersive cinema, we as a company always strive to present the best movie-going experience to the moviegoers. And I think you find that a lot outside of, frankly, North American territory. If you go to Latin America, if you go to some of the newer markets in Europe, where newer theaters are being built, theaters are just, your multiplexes are just generally a better experience, better customer experience, better food experience, ticketing to reserve seating. All of these things are better. And on top of that, now we're experimenting with these immersive technologies to give a new experience to folks. I mean, as Chris mentioned, as a child, when first time you go to the movie theaters and really sit in the big screen and watch a spectacle, it's something that you remember, I think, for the rest of your life, and that makes you go back to the movie theaters over and over and over again. And we're trying to recreate something like that in moviegoers. And the fact that it's only available at a movie theater in a communal experience with no matter how good your TV and your iPad and your smartphone gets, it's just a different viewing experience. But to enhance that with environmental effects, motion seating, additional content, and immersion on the walls, these are all things I think really drives and gives a reason to the moviegoers to come out of their home and go into the movie theater and watch the movies as they're meant to be watched.
So from the perspective, Dan, that you've seen the success of your 4D theatre applications, you've moved across now into the cinema applications, now with VR, what has led to that progression, Dan?
Well, one of the keys that we have to do is we have to try and work towards the actual consumers and the market that we're trying to hit. People are far more sophisticated now than they were 10, 20 years ago. They're expecting more when they go out. They expect more when they see stuff. And without moving into the digital realm, we just can't physically perform all that. We've all been to Pirates of the Caribbean. It's great. It's marvelous. It's, it's really, really expensive. And I think they've redone it once in 40 years because they're like, okay, we're going to tear it apart and do it again. Well, you've got, and now the kids are expecting, I'm going to go here. Next week I'm going to go, I want to see something different. I want to have a totally different experience. And that's where we have to bring in the digital aspects into the physical things that we're trying to do. And of course, movies are successful simply for the reason that every week, you go see a new movie. As we, Mediumation is working in that market, we're also working in the theme park and the family entertainment market, and it's very important to us to be able to cycle those experiences, to take a certain investment from the client and just amortize that over a lot more, real estate as far as it's going. And the only way to really do that is to bring it into the digital realm. And with the advent of VR, it's so special, so new, and so different than what people normally experience that it's going to open up an awful lot of things if these two guys can create content for us.
You've jumped to the chase, haven't you? Really, the core component, Matthew, content.
Look, the reality is, like anything, the devices are great, the experiences are great, but it does come down to story and characters and what's going to engage someone. Now, look, in a theme park, the thrill ride is exciting, and there's no question about it. It's a little bit of a different experience. But regarding cinema, I too, like everyone on this panel, want to see films on the big screen. I mean, we were very fortunate at New Deal to work with Chris Nolan. If you saw Interstellar on your phone or on a television, you're really missing out. See it in IMAX, maybe coming out again, who knows? But it was just, the idea of a big experience. But what I really like about VR is we have the ability to make content short form. And with VR, particularly with Google Cardboard, I mentioned the Cardboard because that's a very, very easy way for anybody with a smartphone or any kind of a mobile device to put it in this cardboard box, which costs like $5, $10, and get almost a 360, well, it is 360, but almost an IMAX kind of like experience that sometimes, depending on how it's photographed, is 3D. Now, I don't think VR is going to replace the cinema experience. There's a whole social aspect to going to a movie that's much different than a more intimate experience of looking at a piece of content. But I think the big challenge, and what we're trying to do at New Deal, and what I'm trying to do as a director, primarily is to make content that is appealing to more mass audience. And I don't mean like dumbing stuff down. I don't mean making things just bombastic and going, exploding in your face, although we seem to do that on a lot of our pieces. But there's a lot of independent film content that's doing VR, like I said, documentaries or really emotional news content stories, which are terrific and I think are great. But for it to really proliferate through the whole world in the global market, you've got to have stuff that people want to download and, in the best case scenario, buy. And so the content has got to be compelling enough for people, as I said earlier, to put this cardboard box on their head or a Gear VR or Oculus. But I don't think it's going to replace cinema. It's just another way to view content. And our approach was, and as I said, almost my entire existence in the film business has been making movies. We've done some television and we've done some, whether it's music videos or TV or stuff for HBO. But at the end of the day, 99% of the work we've ever done as New Deal Studios are feature films that are projected on big screens, whether it's IMAX or multiplex throughout the world. And that experience, I don't want to see go away because I think that really, the difference is your reference to Jurassic Park, prime example. You go watch any movie. It doesn't have to be Jurassic Park. It could be a simple drama, and if it's a really decent DP and director, you're going to have a much different experience on a big screen than you are on a mobile device. Yes. But what attracted me to VR, just hands down, was, okay, if people are not going to the theaters, but yet we are still coming up with these different ways to get people to theaters, if there is a contingent of the market that refuses to go to the movies but can watch things on their mobile device, how do I give them the same experience as a big theater but on a mobile device? And so sort of VR has kind of filled in a little bit for me. But truthfully, as I said, the branding companies, marketing is putting the money in right now. So while it's exciting to see car commercials and bicycles and soda commercials being done in VR, it's got to leap beyond that, so it's strictly content. And with the projects we're working on, from the mission to my business partner Ian did a project called Kaiju Fury, which was kind of an ode to old Toho Godzilla films. We're kind of funding it ourselves, and we're doing it because we want to get it out in the marketplace. Because investors really aren't putting money into this original content yet. Brands are, which is great, because that's usually who will take the risk. However, you've got to have stuff that doesn't have necessarily a specific corporate voice to get it more out to the market, because otherwise you're watching a car commercial, which is cool in VR, but after a while it's going to be like, okay, I want to see something that doesn't involve a guy always in a, name the brand of the car. Anyway.
It's a fair comment. I think fundamentally we come to that point where content is king.
Yeah.
And I'd like to bridge off of that, if that's
Please,
okay,
go for it.
because I'm hearing this, and I agree with it. Content is extremely important, and where I see VR really kind of playing into this, playing into the cinematic experience right now is that bridge that actually will help bring people out of their home. They might experience in their home first, right. But that might be the enticing factor to say, hey, I want to go to the theater and see it, or I want to come to a real experience and see it
right.
bigger than life. And I think one of the complexities with VR today is that there's a level of authenticity that I don't think can be really captured in created content today. That might be controversial, but I look at it from the standpoint of today, when you look through glasses and you look through this artificial sense of what you're supposed to be looking at, and you can look around, that's great, but somebody stated earlier in one of the other examples that there's nothing better than actually being able to stand in the middle of something and really experience it in real life. And we've seen some great technologies here that allow that to kind of blend and merge into it. And, real experience is kind of where we're looking at that and looking at how to really use all the technologies to manipulate it so that when the customer comes in and has this experience, that we're using a multiple different layers of technology in order to create this. And it's all technology that, exists. It's all here today, and it's easily accessible. And I think that begins to really create that compelling, authentic experience when it's combined with live people that customers and guests can actually interact with. So, but content is king, and I think that today there's a wealth of content that's available for us to also capitalize on and use that content to reinvigorate this space, to make sure that cinema is not something that just kind of fades into the background for some of us, especially the youth. Because honestly, if we can't get the kids in there today, they're not going to be those consumers or buyers 30 years from now, and that's going to be a real struggle. So they're going to need a blend of both new and wonderful content that's extremely immersive and sensory and very emotional, as well as being reminded of what was in the past, because I think that's where a lot of passion comes from when we create all the new stuff.
So physicality.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, when you think about physicality and something real, why do we like to go to amusement parks? Why is Disney one of the most successful parks in the world? It's because it exists in real life when you're there. And that's just what it is. And not all their experiences are perfect, but for the most part, they get that. And there's nostalgia connected to that as adults. We want to go and experience that and then bring the kids with us to go and do that. And a real experience, we believe that's a great model to use even with motion pictures and the cinematic experience.
Well, that kind of leads to the ultimate question. Dan, you're using virtual reality. Is the success of the consumer virtual reality systems essential to the success of your application, or are these two things dissimilar? Where do you feel that these two fit in?
Well, we're trying to walk that thin line at the moment, of course, because we're not Facebook. We're not going to put in however many billion to buy an Oculus.
Come on.
Otherwise, I'd own this building. Here we go. But it's got to be. We can't also just be going down a path just. Oh, please release something that people can use. It's we have to look at it. So we're looking at it. We're presenting it in a VR format at the moment, but we're also looking at the abilities to take in a larger thing in the ScreenX type of environment, whether it's big screen, small screen, a lot of people experiencing it, or individual play action, however it might be. And it's just got to be done right. 3D in the consumer world just didn't quite get it. It didn't quite happen. I was at a CES dinner or something, hundreds of people, and they were all up on stage just telling about this is how much it's going to cost. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to come out with all these things. And I raised my hand and said, "Did anybody ask if anybody wants it?" And the whole building got really quiet, and they were like, "Oh, that strange guy, get him out of this whole building. What are you talking about?" And they were like, "You're using this disruptive technology," and it's like, okay, whatever. So it has to be something people actually want. So the fact that there is the Google Cardboard that you can get these things is great. But if all they're going to see, like you said, is little commercials and stuff, it's going to get thrown to the wayside. It's got to be approached properly. And I think that the good side of Oculus waiting is they're making sure that it's right. I hope that's what they're doing. Because we are all counting on somebody coming out with a commercial headset that we can bring onto the market. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the whole VR thing is just going to turn into home gaming, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. The commercial applications for HMDs is essential, because if we're going to use them, they have to fulfill the requirements we need. They have to be ruggedized, able to be cleaned, all of those mini elephants that are in the room that need to be addressed. But from your point of view, Matthew, are you just going to put it on whatever comes along, or are you trying to achieve the widest hit on the best quality HMDs? How do you?
Well, I think that's the challenge. It's funny because I come from a background of always making the image the most, the highest resolution, the sharpest. Oh, we're shooting on like 5K, 6K, 12K, 100K, whatever cameras, digital cameras, or when we used to shoot stuff on VistaVision to get the cleanest film image, or even an IMAX camera. So I come from a place of always making the image pristine. However, that's the technical side of things. Our content, some of the initial photography we did with the jaunt camera and even immersive camera, which was like a Freedom 360, was on GoPros that we used, and we were getting like 4K images and actually cleaning them up quite a bit, making them sharper. And the new Ozo camera, which we just shot with, is a pretty dynamic, completely proprietary camera system. But at the end of the day, to get it to the general public, you've got to stream it. And so all this business, and there's a couple of camera companies out there that have wonderful imagery, and it's like, oh yeah, these files are like 5,000 terabytes of frame. And I was like, okay, well, how do you watch this? It's like, well, you have people walking around with like hard drive backpacks. I said, no. So you've got to pump this through, iPhones and such. And so you're going to down-res these things quite a bit. So in terms of the headsets, like there's this funny thing, and I've had people agree with me 100%, and I had people, want to throw stuff at me. But at the end of the day, I really feel that the content experience will overshadow the technology in the initial. Yes, there's this weird push-pull, because you want something to be an extraordinarily seamless, there's no stitching errors in the 3D or the 360, and the 3D is perfect, and everything is great, and the resolution is great, and the color is great, and the chroma is exactly what it needs to be. And there's that moment where people won't necessarily care about the content initially because it's the sheer experience of the immersion, and this is new and different. But the problem there is that now you're selling a gimmick. And so I believe, and I could be wrong, and it depends on who's watching the content, but people will watch things that may not be of the absolute highest quality with the head-mounted display, and it may not be the absolutely highest quality with what's on a phone, but if the content is really good, people will look past that a little bit. And I kind of feel that with the money that's being thrown at the technology, those headsets will come out and be terrific. The players will be great. All that will be great. I sort of foresee a very weird-looking bottleneck where you're going to have all these headsets that hit the market and all this stuff, and they're going to be, what are we watching? The cat playing the piano? I don't know. There's nothing on here. So I think that's going to be a lot of that, where there needs to be the content that backs it up. So, but on the technology side, and I will say this lastly, it does need to look good too, because what happens is if the experience is not good, if the 3D rips your eyes out because it's not true, the convergence is not correct, the interocular is not correct, and it's giving you a headache, well, then nobody's going to watch it. I don't care how great the content is. So there's this real tricky balance. But I do believe that people will look past, and I've seen this in visual effects because I had spent so many years doing effects work on pictures. I've worked on films where the visual effects were magnificent and the stories were awful. And people would say, oh, yeah, that movie's terrible. It's like, oh, but look at the work we did. Like, yeah, the movie sucked. So, but then I've worked on movies where the effects were not super great, but people were so compelled by the story and the characters, they were like, wow, you worked on that? And I'm like, yeah, it's not really our best work. And I'm like, no, it was a great movie. And so people really get, if you're emotionally caught up in what you're watching, you'll look past the technology a little bit. So.
But from your point of view, Sang, I know, we didn't have it up on the slides, but, CJ, the vast corporation that it is, you have involvement with a company, Simuline,
Right.
Who are developing interactive 4D theatre experiences. I mean, so a phrase that's been used a lot here has been agency, interactivity, that element. So we've gone from the compelling experience to the possibility of including a game-esque type of component?
Well, Simuline is essentially the equipment manufacturer for our 4D business. So yes. they manufacture our seats that go into create the motion effect, as well as our what we call the environmental effect that gets installed into the actual theater itself. Yeah. We talked about content driving all of these experiences. I think it's a balance of making sure the experience has the capability of delivering greatness, but it has to really match I think the intensity of the content. So, and while in the 4D environment we have, we are a movie theater application, and we've been able to secure basically, all studio/local distributor product to fill the auditorium year round. Eventually, I think Chris, you might have mentioned it, but whether it's sports or some alternative content, they can also go into an environment and give it and work really well. I mean, we've talked about watching perhaps NFL in a 4D environment, and I think it was either Dallas or somebody was experimenting with every time there's a tackle, the seat moves and things like that. So now,
concussion vision, it'd be great.
Experience just like the players.
Without killing our technical guys to try to replicate that in a real time environment. You know, something like that could be an interesting application for our technology, as well as, you know, doing concerts, doing other things that can work other than just movies. But and interactivity is definitely one of them in the gaming environment. And a lot of times, you know, gaming. I'm not a gamer myself, but what I find surprising is that there are a lot of people who watch other play games. So that could also be an application where there are gaming tournaments and we can have the audience sit in our environment and get immersed into it that way.
So Chris, from your point of view, it's going to be the big experience, but I do know that you are considering putting the latest technology to immerse the audience in there, as well as the physical sets and the actors. How are you approaching the decision process on that?
Well, the way that we look at it is really about, you know, what are these experiences that we want to bring into the different areas within the venues we want to create. And, you know, in some cases, maybe the experience is more about social gathering and just having you be there with your friends, watching a movie, partaking in the sports event, watching television. You know, if you want to watch, you know, Walking Dead, the season finale on a nice giant screen with 20 of your friends, we want to enable that. We want to make sure that you can come in and do that. Does that necessarily mean they've got to be in a moving chair or have it all around you? No, because this is much more built on that social experience about bringing people out of the house to have this party that's totally catered within our environment, because we have the whole F&B happening, and we've got all the touch points, and we've got everything that's there in order to make the experience comfortable. But in certain aspects, you know, we are working in an environment that we want to completely have the flexibility of scripting. And therefore, there is going to be the need for different types of elements and technology we want to bring in order for our customer to have that heightened experience. And so with each particular production that we want to do, you know, we'll look at those technologies and see what are the right technologies that fit with the experience that we want to give our customers, and then we'll implement those and work with those partners to make those effects happen. That makes it more variable in our environment, and I think that also creates the allure of what's my next visit going to be like when they come to our particular facilities.
Well, thank you, panel, for taking my poor questions. I think it's important that the audience who've paid to be here actually gets a chance to ask their questions. So is there anyone out there with something to ask? Please go, madame.
Okay. Relating to Mr. Grassner's points earlier, right now VR and technology is geared towards action-oriented movies. Do you see sometime in the future where more story-driven and character-driven vehicles will have some type of immersive or VR aspect?
Oh yeah, I mean, the thing that VR does give you, particularly if it's good VR and the stereo is good, even if it's not, it doesn't have to be stereo, there is a sense when it could be really a simple scene, but there's a sense when you're looking at an actor or a couple actors, it is much different than seeing a film. There's a level of, the president's agency, all the cliche, I shouldn't say cliche because it's not that old, but all these terms, it's true. I mean, literally, like, there is a weird sense where you forget where you are. And so there is this, you know, you have a much greater, and it's been said in the press by a million different people, but there's a much greater empathy you have towards a story because you're not like watching it. There's nothing that takes you out of the experience. If you're watching something on a screen that's a proscenium, like a television screen, or just a rectangle, you turn here and you see people sitting here, you're on your couch, or you're in a theater or whatever. When you've got a headset on and you're in that world that these people are reacting to, it's a much, much more emotional experience. So I believe that, I mean, the best example I got, the film The Mission that we did, it's not tongue-in-cheek, but it's more in the vein of like The Great Escape. It's not Saving Private Ryan. I could not do something that drastic and that harsh because people would really get uncomfortable. And there was a fellow who is not a big fan of action-adventure movies, but he saw it and he loved it. But he said, I was a little disturbed because there was a guy who gets shot right next to me. We squibbed people up. It wasn't like Django blood spraying everywhere, but it was it was. But this guy gets shot and he falls. And again, it was and they were Nazis, so it was fine. But when we did this, and this guy was disturbed because he was so immersed in it. There was a guy right next to him who got shot, And I said, well, you know, the tone. He's like, oh, no, from the music and the way it was written, I got the tone. It's not that I didn't catch the tone. He said, it was just such a different experience that I emotionally was sort of, you know, I wanted to kind of get out of that room or that bunker that they were in. So I think that emotionally people will really get, embedded into this. Now, that said, there will have to be some censorship, self-censoring of things, because like horror pictures and other things could be really disturbing. And there's going to be things where people really have to be careful because, you know, many years ago they changed, and going back to old school cinema, subliminal messages, you know, throwing flashes of popcorn stuff. You could do so much damage to people with VR. Don't quote me on that, but because literally you are putting people in an experience that could almost institute post-traumatic stress disorder, that sort of thing. So I think people have to be really careful what they do, because truthfully, that is something that I've had people that were. Everything we've done is very. I don't want to say it's soft and it's simple, but it's action adventure and, you know, some fun drama and even some tongue-in-cheek work. But people still react to it much. If you see the same thing on a flat screen, you react 100% differently. So,
is that the same as the what was it outside the Great Train Robbery in the 1900s? This film will cause mental stress and disorder. We advise our patrons to take special care before viewing it.
That was pure advertising, I think.
Yeah,
that was. But true. I mean, there is a point where I think, or like at any theme park ride, you know, if you have a heart condition, you have something. So I think that there's certain things that, you know, will come into play. But there is a certain, but I'm not talking about a physical throwing a person around. There just not just thematically, just there is a certain sense of escapism that's in VR that is different than really any other experience, and nobody's really done anything and pushed that limit yet. You know, somebody will, but you know, they're just going to have to be smart about what they do.
Right. I mean, I think we talked a lot about content being the real key. These things are just enabler of enhancing the content experience. So what we're hoping, I think, at least from our perspective, and we work with our studios and filmmakers to try to implement these technologies, that sooner or later people experiment with these technologies and really just weave it in, somehow integrate it into the storytelling process, so that we're not just sort of tacking on top of a ready-made film, but it's an integral part of the film going forward. I mean, I hate to advertise other people's product, but you know, we have a very close relationship with IMAX.
Yes.
And one thing that those guys mentioned is the reason why directors work in IMAX format is because these guys grow up watching IMAX at, you know, the big old school IMAX theaters. And while those things were having a tough time becoming a business, these guys became filmmakers and decided, you know what, it's a cool thing to make films into IMAX and really weave it into it. Just like James Cameron finally did something with 3D, that is a real 3D experience. So we're hoping filmmakers adapt to whether it's the motion and environmental effects or a 270-degree sort of immersive screen experience, and we're already having some real good discussions with the filmmakers on this front. If they are able to really maximize the impact, then even without the action sequence and things like that, I think they can be utilized to give you, you know, all kinds of emotions, sadness, excitement, you know, melancholy, whatever it might be, I think could definitely be expressed and enhanced in using these technologies.
I was lucky enough to present at CinemaCon, which is the cinema industry and the cinema distribution industry's core event, and they're concerned about the perfect storm. We have a large number of fantastic films coming out this year, or have come out this year, and James Bond and Star Wars to end, but then there's a bit of a dearth. And so they're looking at what is that thing that's going to drive audiences. They're looking at 4D, they're looking at immersive entertainment, and they're looking at a better experience. Interesting fact, the Star Wars franchise will be announced, I think it's already announced, but you know, I'm going to go out on a limb here. The initial screenings for the new Star Wars film will only be in IMAX initially.
Wow.
The same way Cameron has just announced that he will be working on Barco Escape films. So it is like these producers and these production houses want to create initially that big bang, that big experience before they then send it out to the popcorn-drenched smaller facilities. So it's important to. I like to use the phrase the big bang approach. It's that they really want you to have that unique experience, so you will go and watch it again and again. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great, well, we only have one more day left of Digital Hollywood, but I'd like to at least end by giving a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you, gentlemen.